Have you ever walked into a room and felt like you didn't belong, not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't? A tension in the air, a sadness no one spoke of, and somehow it clung to you. There's a kind of person who feels too much, who sees beneath the surface, who can't walk through life numb and untouched. Maybe that's you. And maybe, for a long time, you thought something was wrong with you, that the exhaustion was weakness, that the anxiety was your fault, that the ache inside you, so ancient, so quiet, so deep, was something you had to fix. But what if I told you? That ache is not your flaw, it's your compass. You weren't meant to fit in. You were meant to feel, to see, to remember. Something the world has forgotten, and I know, when you feel everything, it's easy to lose yourself, easy to mistake other people's pain as your own, easy to drown. But you're still here, and that means something. This isn't about fixing you. This is about meeting you, the real you, the one behind the armor, the one who never stopped sensing, even when it hurt. So take a breath. Let's go beneath the noise. There's something you've carried all your life. And now it's time to understand why. There are people who come into this world already listening to something most others cannot hear. They carry a sense, not just of what is visible, but what moves behind it. And from a young age they feel it, a strange knowing, a closeness to something unseen. Maybe you've felt it too. You were the child who cried when the air changed, who looked at the sky and felt it staring back, who walked into a classroom and knew which friend was hiding pain before they ever spoke. You didn't ask for it, but it followed you. The world teaches us to call this too sensitive, too emotional, too intense. You're told to toughen up, to stop thinking so much, to let things go. But how can you let go of something that speaks to your very bones? I want you to know there is nothing wrong with you. What you're carrying, it isn't madness, it's a kind of intelligence, an ancient way of knowing, but when no one names it, it becomes a burden, and so you learn to shrink it, suppress it, question it. You learn to wear the mask, smile when your chest aches, numb when your body wants to scream, be functional, be fine, until one day you can't, because something inside you refuses to stay silent. There is a line the mystics call the veil, a thin space between the visible and the invisible. Most people lie far from it. You, perhaps, were born near it. And what lies near the veil is not always easy, but it is powerful. I once met a boy named Thomas. He was 15 when his mother brought him to me. He wouldn't talk to anyone, not because he didn't care, but because he felt everything. I remember the way he watched the window, like it was whispering to him. He told me later he couldn't walk by hospitals without shaking, couldn't touch someone's hand without sensing grief. He thought he was cursed, but I told him gently, no. He was simply standing too close to the truth. That's where we begin, with truth, not the loud, certain kind that pretends to know everything, but the soft kind that hums in the bones, that waits in silence, that asks, do you remember? If you're still here, then maybe you've been carrying something you couldn't name, a door you couldn't quite close, a feeling you couldn't explain, and maybe, just maybe, that's not an accident, because there is a path through this. Not to escape it, but to finally understand it. Let this be a beginning, a mirror held gently to what you've always sensed. A whisper you're finally ready to hear. The world will not validate this path. It will not cheer you on. But that doesn't mean it isn't real. You know it is. You've always known. And now we begin. Some people wake up tired no matter how long they've slept. Not just in the body, but in the soul. They carry a heaviness they can't explain. As if they've been walking through a storm that no one else sees. You feel things others don't. You sense when someone's lying before they speak. You notice the silence after a fight, the sadness behind a smile, the grief hiding inside a laugh. It's not that you're looking for it. It finds you. It always has. You've probably been told you're too much. You've heard it from lovers, teachers, friends, maybe even yourself. And yet, when someone needs to be understood, they come to you. When someone breaks, they lean on you, not because you're stronger, but because you're open. That openness, though, it comes at a cost. You walk into a crowded room, and it's like every emotion clings to your skin. Joy, fear, shame, desire, it all rushes in. You feel things you can't name, and you wonder again if maybe you're just broken, weak, oversensitive, but you're not. You're porous. And in a world that rewards disconnection, being porous feels like drowning. Think of your nervous system as a net. Most people have tight filters, but yours is wide, fine, intricate. You catch everything, not just emotions, energies, stories, memories, longings that don't belong to you, but somehow live inside you. It's exhausting, isn't it? You try to make sense of what you feel, but the feelings don't speak in logic. They speak in pulses, in flickers. In the way your stomach tightens when you pass a stranger, in the way you wake from dreams with tears already falling. You're not imagining things, you're responding to things that lie beneath the surface, and that's not a disorder. It's a different kind of awareness, one the world has forgotten how to honor. I knew a woman named Nora. She was a painter, quiet, solitary. She once told me she cried every time it rained. Not because she was sad, but because the rain reminded her of something she couldn't remember. A home she never knew, a sound buried in the earth. She would stand by her window and weep, and she hated it, thought it meant she was unstable. But she wasn't unstable, she was tuned. The rain was her language. The world spoke to her in water. And maybe the world has been speaking to you too. But if no one teaches you the language, you think you're going mad. You think something's wrong. When really, you're just hearing what others have learned to ignore. You can't keep carrying everyone. You can't keep walking through life as an open wound. But you also can't numb what makes you, you. So where do we begin? We begin with permission. Permission to feel it all, to name it, to trace it back, to ask, gently, is this mine? Not everything you feel belongs to you, and once you know that, really know it, everything changes. Your body becomes a compass, not a battlefield. Your tears become messages, not failures, and your sensitivity begins to guide you instead of consume you. This is where the shift begins. This is where you start to take yourself back. There's a moment in every sensitive person's life when they start to believe the pain is personal, that the sadness they feel must be theirs, that the fear, the tightness in the chest, the sudden waves of sorrow must belong to something broken inside them. But what if it doesn't? What if what you're feeling isn't always yours? No one tells you that when you're highly sensitive, you're not just emotionally aware, you're psychically receptive. Your system isn't just tuned to mood, it's tuned to what lies beneath mood, to what's been buried, denied, repressed. The problem is, if you don't know that, you start building your identity around pain that was never yours to carry. You start calling it my anxiety, my sadness, my darkness, when in truth you may be holding echoes. Residual grief that never had a voice, trauma that moved through bloodlines, energy left behind in the room, unspoken things that needed a home, and you became that home, because that's what sensitivity without awareness becomes, absorption. And absorption without boundaries, it becomes suffering. I remember a young man named Caleb. He was 24. He told me he hadn't slept more than 3 hours a night in years. He couldn't explain it. There was no trauma he could name. No clear reason for his exhaustion. But every time he walked past a hospital, he cried. Every time he touched a dying tree, he wept. He thought he was mentally ill. But then he told me about his dreams. He dreamed of angels feeding him soil, wolves licking wounds that weren't his, a city collapsing, and him standing in its center, untouched. I looked him in the eye and said, "You're not sick. You're a vessel. No one taught you how to hold. That's what's missing, the teaching. We train people to function, to conform, but we don't teach them how to hold what they feel, especially when what they feel is invisible to others. You don't need less sensitivity, you need more consciousness. Because when you don't know where you end and the world begins, you confuse reception with identity. You think the storm is inside you, when really you're standing in it without an umbrella. But once you learn to witness rather than absorb, something changes. You begin to name what you feel. You begin to sort what enters. You begin to ask, is this mine? Is this me? Or the room? Is this my fear? Or a wave moving through me? You stop drowning, you start discerning, and the emotions that once felt like floods begin to show their source. The tears don't stop, but they soften. The noise doesn't disappear, but it becomes music you can learn to read. And your nervous system starts to trust you again. This is not about shutting off. It's about turning inward, building a container strong enough to hold what's real, and let the rest move through. It's not detachment, it's clarity. And clarity is what protects you. Not walls, not numbness, not pretending. Just the quiet knowing that what you feel is real. But it doesn't always belong to you. That knowing, it's where freedom begins. Dreams are not random. They are not noise. They are not simply your brain releasing steam. They are messages, alive, symbolic, necessary. If your waking life is the surface, your dreams are the depth. And what lives in the depth doesn't speak in words. It speaks in images, in symbols, in archetypes. When you are highly sensitive, the barrier between your conscious mind and your unconscious world is thinner. And that means your dreams will often come loud, vivid, strange. They may frighten you, confuse you, leave you wondering what is wrong with you. But nothing is wrong. You are being spoken to. The unconscious doesn't use grammar. It uses metaphor. And it doesn't care whether you understand. It cares whether you listen. I once worked with a librarian named Miriam. Every few nights, she dreamed of drowning. In some dreams, she was pulled under by invisible hands. In others, the ocean came for her slowly, rising in the walls of her own house. She tried to ignore it, told herself it was stress, overwork, but the dreams didn't stop. They intensified until one night the water turned clear, and at the bottom of it she saw herself, calm, whole, untouched. She wept when she told me. She thought the water had come to destroy her, but really it came to show her. She'd been avoiding her own depth. Dreams don't punish, they reveal, but only if we stop running from them. You see, when you suppress your emotions, they return an image. When you ignore your intuition, it returns in metaphor. When you avoid your truth, it returns in dreams. The unconscious will always find a way to be heard. And for the sensitive soul, dreams are often the first language it uses, but most of us were never taught how to read that language. So we wake in panic, dismiss what came, tell ourselves it didn't mean anything, that we're just too much. You are not too much. You are being initiated. Floods in dreams may mean overwhelm. Fire may mean transformation. Animals may symbolize instinct, protection, or guides. Children often represent the inner self. Elderly women can be wisdom keepers. Strange homes may be the psyche itself. These aren't just stories, they're maps, and your unconscious draws them in the dark, hoping you'll turn on the light. So write them down. Don't try to figure them out. Let them sit with you. Let them breathe. Notice what stirs in your body when you recall them. Where do you feel warmth? Tension, longing, which images return again and again. There is no dream too strange, no image too small. They are all fragments of you coming home. And when you begin to honor them, when you begin to listen, the dreams shift. They stop chasing. They begin guiding, because the unconscious doesn't want to hurt you. It wants relationship. It wants you to stop fearing your own depth. To remember that you were not made for surface living. You were made for meaning, and meaning begins in symbol, begins in image, begins in dream. So tonight, when you sleep, listen. Something sacred is trying to speak. There comes a point in the life of every sensitive soul when the light begins to dim. Not because they've failed, but because they've absorbed too much. The silence grows louder. The world feels heavier. And something inside them starts to slip beneath the surface. You might know that place where waking up feels like dragging yourself through mud, where your body aches without cause, where joy becomes a memory, not an experience. You're not just tired, you're waterlogged, and no one sees it. You keep showing up, you keep smiling, you keep functioning, but inside, something is unraveling. It's not burnout, it's not laziness, it's not weakness, it's descent. The ancient ones had a word for it. Katabasis, the journey downward, the spiral into the depths of the soul. Not to die, but to be remade. But no one tells you that. Do they instead? You hear diagnosis, depression, anxiety. Maybe they're true. Maybe they help, but they don't tell the whole story. They don't speak to the mythic layer, the symbolic truth, the part of you that knows this isn't just a collapse, it's a calling. Because when the soul has carried too much for too long, it doesn't scream, it sinks. And in that sinking, everything false begins to fall away. The roles, the masks, the small talk, the pretending. You can't fake it anymore. You can't explain it away. You can't distract yourself with more doing. You're being stripped, and it's terrifying, but also necessary. I once sat with a woman named Elise, a therapist herself, wise, kind, a mother of two. But after losing her father, something inside her broke open. She couldn't sit with clients without shaking, couldn't go to the grocery store without crying. The world felt like too much, so she isolated, hid, told no one. Until one night, she dreamed of falling through the floor during a dinner party. No one noticed. She landed in a dark cavern where an old woman painted symbols on her skin. When she woke, she was trembling, ashamed, confused. But I knew what had happened. She wasn't being buried. She was being marked. Because when the descent begins, you don't get to control the form. It doesn't arrive politely. It doesn't ask your permission. It comes through loss, through breakage, through silence that stretches too long. And if you don't know what it is, you mistake it for failure. But it's not failure, it's initiation. The darkness you're feeling is not the end, it's the entrance. The place where your old self begins to dissolve, and the deeper self begins to emerge. But let me be clear, this is not a spiritual fantasy. This is not romantic. It hurts, it isolates, it confuses. You may lose friends, jobs, certainty. You may wonder if you're going crazy. You're not. You're descending. And what's being asked of you is simple, but not easy. Do not numb. Do not run. Do not pretend it's fine. Stay, even as it burns, even as it breaks you, even as it strips everything you thought you were, because beneath the collapse there is something ancient waiting, a center, a clarity, a quiet self that does not flinch, and that self, it cannot be accessed by avoiding the descent. It can only be found by walking through it. So if you are in it now, if you're in the darkness, the emptiness, the fog, I want you to know you're not lost. You're being called, not back to who you were, but forward to who you've always been. Something begins to shift when you stop resisting the descent, when you stop trying to explain it away, or fix it, or escape it. When you start letting the darkness speak. At first, it feels chaotic, heavy, random, but then patterns emerge. Symbols repeat, and you begin to notice. The world is no longer just the world. It's a mirror. Every moment begins to feel charged. Every encounter carries meaning, not because you're imagining it, but because your perception has deepened. Your inner landscape has awakened, and now it reflects itself in everything. This is the threshold of archetype. You start dreaming of rivers, not floods, of wolves that guide, not hunt, of rooms with locked doors, and keys in your hand. You begin to see beyond surface emotion. You ask, what is this really? Not just why am I sad? But what is this sadness connected to? What does it want from me? You stop being overwhelmed by your feelings. You start tracking them. The psyche becomes a map, and you, finally, begin to read it. I knew a man named Jonah, a sculptor in New Mexico. For years, he struggled with sounds no one else could hear, not voices, not hallucinations, just frequencies, tones, echoes. They haunted him. Doctors gave him pills. He tried everything, until one day, in the desert, he stopped fighting them. He started sculpting what he heard. The shapes were strange, spiraled, layered, raw. Months later, a local gallery picked up his work. People wept in front of his pieces. Said they felt something ancient, something familiar. Jonah still heard the sounds, but they no longer hurt. They had become form. That's what happens when you stop rejecting what you sense, when you stop labeling it as too much, when you begin to collaborate with it. Your sensitivity doesn't disappear, it becomes precise. You start recognizing the difference between emotional chaos and symbolic charge, between empathic overload and intuitive signal, and once you do, you don't need to absorb everything. You can feel the sorrow in a stranger's eyes and know it's not yours, but it's real. You can witness the tension in a room and choose, do I enter this field or stay grounded in mine? You begin to hold your sensitivity like a lens, not a wound. And through that lens, the world opens, not as noise, but as message, not as burden, but as mirror, and every symbol becomes a doorway. Every moment becomes a myth, not the kind told by others, but the one you are already living. The one your soul came here to remember, and now it's remembering. There is a sacred difference between being a sponge and being a vessel. A sponge absorbs everything. It soaks in whatever touches it, pain, chaos, joy, grief, until it is soaked through and dripping with what is not its own. A vessel holds, it has shape, containment, it receives what is meant for it, and lets the rest pass through. For the sensitive soul, this distinction is survival. You were not made to absorb everyone's pain. You were not made to carry the whole world in your body. You were made to feel deeply, yes, but with structure, with sovereignty. Sensitivity without boundaries becomes suffering. Sensitivity with boundaries becomes vision. The difference is not in how much you feel. It's in how you hold what you feel. And that begins with the question, what is mine? Not everything you sense belongs to you. Not every emotion needs to be healed. Not every tension needs your energy. There is power in discernment. I once worked with a yoga teacher named Ava. She told me she used to dread walking into her studio before class. Every time she left feeling drained, disoriented, heavy. She thought she was failing as a healer, but what she was really doing was absorbing. She had no energetic boundaries. She opened completely, out of care, out of compassion, but didn't know how to close, so we worked slowly, not to harden her, but to root her. She created morning rituals. She learned to ground before every session. She imagined her body like a chalice, open to what was meant for her, closed to what was not. Weeks later, she told me something had changed. She still felt the energy in the room, still sensed people's pain, but she didn't drown in it. She could meet others without losing herself. This is what boundaries do. They are not walls. They are membranes. They do not disconnect. They define. Where do I end? Where do you begin? What am I truly here to carry? And what can I witness without claiming? When you learn this, you stop trying to fix everyone. You stop playing the role of rescuer. You stop leaking your energy into every open wound. And something beautiful happens. Your intuition sharpens. Your emotions stabilize. Your presence deepens. You don't shut down. You refine. And in that refinement, your sensitivity becomes something else entirely. It becomes a guide, not a flood, a river, not a scream, a song, and you. You are no longer drowning. You are navigating on your terms, in your rhythm, with your soul intact. To see deeply in a world that avoids depth is no small thing. There is a cost to it. You walk into rooms and sense the unspoken. You feel the tension no one names. You see the stories behind the eyes of strangers, and often you can't unsee them. This is the cross the wounded seer carries, not just that you feel, but that you know what others won't say. You see what others have buried, and the weight of that knowing, it's immense, because the world rarely asks for that kind of truth. It rewards masks, it promotes performance, it clings to surface, and so the seer begins to question their gift. They shrink, they apologize, they tell themselves, maybe if I care less, it will hurt less. But here's what I need you to understand. You are not meant to stop seeing. You are meant to learn how to hold what you see. That holding begins with witness. Not fixing, not absorbing, not rescuing, just witnessing. I once knew a man named Derek, a quiet Vietnam veteran who rarely spoke. He worked with survivors of trauma, not by offering advice, but by listening in a way that made people weep. He never interrupted, never judged, just sat there, grounded and open, and in his presence, people remembered themselves. Derek had seen too much, but instead of letting it close him, he let it carve him into something precise. He didn't use many words. He didn't need to. His silence said everything. This is what it means to be a conscious sensitive. You do not carry the pain of others in your body. You hold space for them to feel it themselves. You do not rush to soothe discomfort. You trust that discomfort is part of the alchemy. You do not lose yourself in empathy. You become a mirror, still, honest, reflective, and in that reflection, others begin to see clearly. It's tempting to numb this capacity, to close your eyes, to dull your intuition, to pretend not to notice. Because yes, sometimes being awake hurts, but the gift of vision is not about comfort, it's about presence. When you walk into a room and feel everything, pause, don't react, don't take it on. Just notice, witness, breathe, ask yourself, what is mine to do here? Sometimes the answer will be nothing. Just your presence is enough. Because a grounded, sensitive soul is dangerous to illusion. They can't be manipulated. They can't be distracted. They can't be seduced by noise. They see through, and that seeing, it brings truth, and truth brings healing. So don't close your eyes. Don't apologize for what you know. Let the world be uncomfortable in your presence if it must. Your task is not to blend in. Your task is to bear witness, to see with clarity, to feel with precision, to remain awake. Returning to the world after descent is the most delicate part of the journey. It's one thing to awaken. It's another to stay awake, because the world will try to pull you back into roles, into masks, into smallness. You'll be tempted to pretend again, to make others comfortable, to shrink what you've seen. But once you've touched your soul, you can't unknow it, and you shouldn't. You are not here to go back to normal. You are here to live differently. That doesn't mean abandoning your life. It means embodying your truth within it. There is a myth that awakening means leaving everything behind, running to the forest, starting over, but real transformation, it roots itself in the ordinary. You still go to work, you still pay bills, you still sit at dinner tables, but you do it from your center now, not from your conditioning. You don't pretend you're fine when you're not. You don't say yes when your body says no. You don't absorb what isn't yours just to keep the peace. You live honestly, softly, clearly, and that clarity, it shifts things not through force, but through frequency. You become a quiet recalibration, a reminder, a signal to others that something else is possible. I once met a woman named Elena. She worked in corporate marketing for years. After her breakdown at 42, everything changed, but she didn't leave her job. She didn't sell all her things and move to a cabin. She just started living from her depth. She brought silence into meetings. She spoke when it mattered. She stopped apologizing for being intuitive, and slowly the culture around her shifted. Not dramatically, but subtly, people began asking deeper questions, taking longer pauses, sharing real things, not because she taught them, but because she became the teaching. That's what it looks like to return without losing yourself. You don't have to be loud. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be rooted, present, whole, and when the world invites you to forget, you remember. You remember the cave, the flood, the dream, the descent, the fire that burned everything false. You remember what you reclaimed there, and you carry it with you, not as weight, but as presence. This is the new path, the integration, the return, not to who you were, but to who you now are. You've walked through the descent. You've seen the symbols, felt the weight of silence, learned the language of your dreams, and now here you are, standing at the edge of something new, not broken, not lost, but initiated. Your sensitivity is no longer a wound. It's a gift of precision, a compass, a mirror. You don't flinch at what others hide. You don't drown in what others ignore. You witness it, you feel it, and you stay rooted. That is rare, and it changes things. Because most of the world is still sleeping, still numbing, still pretending. They don't yet know how to hold what they feel. But you do, not because it's easy, but because you earned it. You learned to listen to the symbols, to feel without losing yourself, to stand still when the room sways, and now your presence carries weight, not because you speak loudly, but because you no longer apologize for your depth. You become the mirror, not one that reflects appearances, but one that reveals essence. You carry the myth, not as a story you tell, but as a life you live. Your body becomes the temple, your silence becomes the prayer, your gaze becomes a door, and those around you, they feel it. Even if they can't name it, you are no longer here to fix everything. You are here to witness, to walk with integrity, to remind others, gently, that soul is still possible. The old world will still ask you to explain yourself, to be more efficient, to be less intense, to be simpler. But you are no longer any of those things. You are whole. And wholeness isn't efficient, it's holy. So take up space, not with noise, but with presence. Let your depth speak in silence. Let your myth live in your choices. Let your soul carry what words cannot. You don't need to be everything to everyone. You just need to be true to yourself, to the path you've walked, to the knowing you now carry. Because in a world that forgets itself daily, a single soul who remembers can shift everything. You've descended, you've risen, you are not fragile, you are feral, you are not broken, you are the medicine, and now you are free.